Mr. Ace Michael.
I feel good. I knew that I would now. I feel good. I knew that I would. So good, so good. I got you. I feel nice. Sugar and spice. I feel nice. Sugar and spice. So nice, so nice. I got you. Come on, y'all. When I hold you in my arms, know that I can't do no wrong. When I hold you in my arms, can't do me no harm. And I feel, I knew that I would. I feel good. I knew that I would. So good, so good. I got you.
We have a lot of horses, some chickens,
Oh
a
my
bunch
God.
of dogs. I call them the yard dingoes. And a big turtle, like the biggest turtle I've ever seen. He's huge. His name is Shelly. But yeah, and he's kind of grumpy, but I like him. You know, you give him food and he eats, and he's always really appreciative. You can always tell he's excited because he walks over really quick. But if you get too close, he goes inside of his shell and he hisses. They kind of go make this weird like noise. So anyway, I call him Grumpy
Wow.
Shelly. But yeah, and he's just this huge. I guess he must be a tortoise, not really a turtle. He's big.
So now, why do you have chickens on the farm? Do you eat the chickens? You don't eat your chickens, do you?
No. The eggs, we just, we do like organic eggs. I mean, that's what I go out and we get the eggs and I use the eggs.
And you must apparently like the sound of chickens all day long going, what?
You know what? They're not that loud, but this house has great, walls. It's like, it's a brick house and the walls are literally 18 inches thick. So you don't really hear a lot from outside. It's pretty well insulated.
Good to know. So we're going to start the show. Hey, man, it is the Ace Michaels Show. And thank you so much for watching and sharing and liking the show, being a part of the experience, as it were. Today, we have published author on our show with actual book in vicinity,
Yeah.
book in proximity, able to actually reach out, grab book, show to the crowd. Isn't that amazing? It's no longer a fictional thing. It could be a fictional thing, but in this case, it's not actually a fictional thing.
Yeah, it went from, it's a memoir. So this book is about my life. I changed names and, of people and certain things in my life because not everything has been easy. And I didn't want to, hurt or harm anyone. I just needed to talk about what my experience was like through these different experiences. And the things that I've learned, I spent a lot of time just avoiding the truth of my situation, kind of avoiding the truth of being in a lot of emotional pain, and kind of creating this alternative world where, I could avoid really dealing with reality by escaping to this kind of magical thinking of, well, it's really not that bad, or it's really not quite what you think. I would tell people. But, the only person that was really kind of misleading themselves was me. I was the one that wasn't really ready to look at every area of my life that hadn't, that was painful. So it's a very vulnerable book for me. It's definitely, I tell the truth and I expose a lot about myself. With the idea in mind that my experience could help somebody else maybe arrive at some of these different, meanings and understandings and the wisdom, if you will, of my life experience quicker than I did. Because if I could help someone, that's always been kind of my goal with this book, is if I could make a critical difference in the life of another person, then I felt like that was really my way of kind of saying thank you for having arrived at these I call them truths. I mean, I'm a work in progress. No one is perfect, and I get that. We all have things that we deal with and have been through. But I think that when you learn how to stop avoiding things and really engage life, that's not always easy for people to do. So if you learn how to do it, you should share it so other people can join in. Because my goal is I'd like to see a happier society and just people, living in inner peace and with a lot more joy in their heart than, heartache and heartbreak and sadness. And so that was my reason for writing the book.
That's pretty amazing. Now, Melissa, when you were writing the book, were you still parenting and wifing and entrepreneuring while you were writing the book?
Yeah. Well, as I say, this book is really real and really raw. And I wrote this book at a time of kind of some really, difficult circumstances. There were some revelations that I had just learned about, some really difficult things. And I was trying to process the sum total of all of these events that have kind of come into my life. A lot of people, I used to have a nickname, Black Cloud, because I literally, if it could go wrong, it would go wrong, in my world, and even it was kind of a joke that, chaos followed me wherever I went. But what I started to realize is that I expected
what the fuck, man? Who thinks that's a joke? What do you do? What kind of joke is that? Yeah.
It's not fun, I hated the fact, but I'm telling you, when you read my book, you'll understand.
Okay.
It's really, at some point, it becomes almost unbelievable that all of this happens to one person. But it did. And
wow.
and people would ask me all the time, Melissa, how do you do it? How do you handle all of this? And the truth is, by not. I think that there was a little bit of a saving grace, that was given to me with my ability to kind of create a magical place where I could not feel everything. I think it was just a really creative way of coping. I'm not saying it was healthy, but it was creative. Because at some point we all have to face those things in life. I didn't want to avoid the truth of who, of all of these experiences and what it really meant for my life. And I knew that I was not dealing with things. And what was happening is I became angry. I became grumpy and just kind of unpleasant, because I just was mad. I was hurt. Like, I was really hurting. And so instead of saying I'm really hurting, I would say, like, I'm really angry. And I just pushed everyone away, thinking that would be a safer place than letting them in. And that felt too vulnerable. Like, I really felt like I couldn't take one more heartbreak or one more loss or one more disappointment. And then I discovered I could. And I discovered that I'm a lot stronger than I've ever given myself credit for. If I will, stand in that and just let the experience teach me something, those lessons had meaning and wisdom. And I started to really appreciate that ability to just stand with that experience, all of that pain. And instead of taking it into that angry place, that avoidance place, I just let it teach me what it was meant to.
A little preview of the book. Like, what can we expect?
Well, you can expect to kind of go through some highs and lows with me, to really get a good sense of what it was like to be me as a young girl, as a teenage girl, as a young adult, as a married woman, as a mother, and as this emerging kind of artist and author and entrepreneur. I kind of take you through the whole story of my life.
Wow. And when you're writing a book, is there something that you can do in a book or say in a book that you're not able to say with your painting or with your one-on-one courses that you do with people?
I think the book is really my way of letting people know me so that they can understand the value of working with me. There really isn't anything that I haven't dealt with. I've dealt with abuse. I've dealt with emotional abuse and physical abuse. I've dealt with loss. I've dealt with, my mom was she is a cancer survivor, but only by the grace of God. She was sick, from the time I was a 10-year-old girl to this day. I'm still, kind of watching my mom go through all of these really difficult transitions. I've had strained relationships with my family. Mm-hmm. I've had a marriage that has definitely had troubles. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, infidelity, and we didn't really know each other well enough, I think, when we got married to realize that life would be a little challenging because we didn't know how to communicate well. Mm-hmm. But there was a lot of love there. Just it wasn't mature enough at the time, and we made a lot of mistakes. We just did. I'm very real and very open and honest with people because I believe that if you're ever really going to help somebody, you have to genuinely show up as you are. If I pretend to be something that I'm not, then I lose my credibility. And what I'm seeking to have is like a genuine dialogue or a genuine experience with other people. Mm-hmm. And I want them to know that what they get from me is that authenticity. I am who I am. And I've laid it all out there because I really have done things the wrong way in order to discover and see the value of doing things a right way, a better way, if you will. Mm. And so I think I've gained a lot of insight through my experiences, and I know that I help people now. I help people understand themselves in a way that I could not have been able to do had I not been given all of these experiences in life. And I used to call them, I used to feel more like a victim, and I don't feel that way at all anymore. I actually feel like I was a student, and this was my very customized education, if you will, unique to me. So I have a PhD in my life, and I know what I've been through, and I know that I am the leading expert in me because I've studied myself. I've really gone and done the hard work. I call it the bowl full of fish hooks. We all have one thing that we think we're dealing with, but really it's kind of attached to another thing, which is attached to another thing, which is attached to another thing, which takes you all the way back down to this. And I didn't really understand how intertwined all of this stuff was. And that's why the book was really necessary, because I needed people to understand how I arrived here. And you really can't know that unless you start the journey off with me from the beginning. And from the beginning is where my, life gave me kind of a very complicated message. On the one hand, I had this home, this beautiful family, but that I grew up in. But my mom was sick, and then she left us. And then my dad, who was a hardworking man, he showed his love through that, through providing. But emotionally, he was very distant. And when I'm a very emotional person, and as a little girl, when your mom is, not living with you, and you're kind of worried about that, I needed a lot from him that he just couldn't give me. And created some problems, between he and I, and you're not going to really understand how it is that I chose the different men, in my life, or my husband, if you will. If you don't understand where I came from, then it doesn't make sense, because It's all intertwined. It's my bowl full of fish hooks. So that's why I decided to really tell my story, if you will, and just kind of lay it all out there, because my programs are really designed with that in mind. My coaching is really designed with that in mind. I really want to get to the heart of the matter and really help them kind of deal with those bowl full of fish hooks so that they can let them go and just have a bowl. And then they're a vessel. And then they can carry more, they can take more with them. When you've got all this stuff inside, it's hard to make room. It's hard to make room for things.
It's so interesting. Today I was listening to the news on the radio, and they were talking about the conflict that's going on in Syria. And they estimated that 50,000 people have nowhere to go, and they're literally just waiting out the end of this war with the understanding that they're probably going to die. They don't have electricity, they don't have enough food, and no one's going to rescue them, and no one's going to let them go to any place else. So they're basically waiting to die. So when I thought about this, it was a very impactful thought for me, of course. But now I want to ask you, was there ever a time when you felt like you were waiting to die? Like pretty much you had gone through enough stuff that you were like, this is pretty much it. Life doesn't get any more sucky than this right here. I'm just kind of done. And rather than commit suicide, I'm just kind of waiting to die. Because what else is there?
Well, yeah. I think it's easy to go through the motions of life and exist. You can kind of exist. I didn't, and trust me, there were moments where I was in so much pain, I actually thought about taking my life. Like I was really in that much pain. It was either, check out and be done with this, life, because it just hurts so much. It hurt all the time. Or I had to figure out how to start to feel something other than this pain. But this pain was very real. It was very debilitating, and it was very overwhelming. And there were a lot of people that, had judged me, maybe unfairly or maybe fairly. I guess that's, not really for me to answer. But I didn't feel like people really understood me. And that made me feel like this outsider. And so I just kind of stayed away from everyone. I stopped engaging people. I used to have a lot of friends, and I would be really involved in community projects, and I stopped because at some point I just, it hurt. Like everything hurt. It hurt to get up. It hurt to go out. It hurt to be around people, because I just sensed their questions or their confusion about me and how I was coping or how I was getting through the circumstances that I was facing. And I didn't want to feel that. So I just stayed away. And so I do that existing thing, that kind of waiting. I was just, waiting, killing time, if you will. Just my days had really, like, there was a beginning and an end, but I couldn't tell you what I did. There was no real, I loved my children, but I wasn't really very present all the time because I was just kind of checked out. And I didn't like that. I was aware of it at times. And it bothered me. It bothered me a lot that I wasn't the mother or the person that I wanted to be. And it took a lot of work, a lot of real, like, turning in and, inward and really asking myself some really hard questions and facing some even, some truth about myself that I didn't like, and I had to get very real with myself in order to really help myself. I had to really deal with me and everything that had happened. And I don't want to give too much away because I think that the book does a better job than I can in just this quick, little interview. I mean, I definitely appreciate my life. I definitely know that I have been given more blessings than burdens now. And before, I used to just feel like I was cursed by God. Like, that man just didn't like me. The guy upstairs just didn't like me.
Now, speaking of that...
So I distanced myself from him.
Now, speaking of that, this is the time...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, speaking of that, of God, this is the time when people would feel like they're reborn, or they had a spiritual awakening. Is that what you went through? Did you go through a spiritual awakening?
Absolutely. But I think what I found is that I think it's all spiritual. I think that every day we're having a spiritual experience, whether we realize it or not. It's just, are we ready to recognize that? Will we accept that? Can we see that every exchange, every moment is a spiritual experience? We always, we decide, are we standing in alignment with those kind of divine principles, those things that really bring out the best in us? Or are we selling ourselves, short by short-term gains, or, gaining the advantage of, over another, maybe in a way that's not really very in line with, the true nature of who we are. I could see that there were a lot of things going on in the world that could be looked at many ways, but it's all tied to who we are and at the core of who we are. We can deny it for a while, but it's one thing that we can't forget is who we are. Our soul has a way of reminding us, whether it's your conscience, you can call it whatever you want, your intuition, that moment where you feel like, I don't know if that was such a good move. There's lots of ways that I think our soul talks to us, but we're always having a spiritual experience, in my opinion. So.
And what were some of those tough questions you had to ask yourself, if you don't mind sharing?
What did I want? What do you want? Like, what do you want?
What was so tough about that?
I couldn't answer that question. I remember, what do I want? I knew what I didn't want, but I didn't know what I wanted. Like, it's sort of like I knew how to back away from hell, but I didn't know how to get my way to heaven. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I knew I didn't want to hurt. I knew I didn't want to be in a bad relationship. I knew that I didn't want to, have regrets. I knew that I didn't want to be angry, but I didn't know that I wanted to speak. I didn't know that I wanted to write a book. I didn't know that I wanted to live a life that was filled with inspiration. And I didn't know that I wanted to be inspiring for another person until I got really serious about answering that question. What do I want? I wanted good relationships with my children. I wanted to be proud of who I am. I wanted my life to have meaning. I remember thinking that in the 4.5 years that my son Drew was alive, that his life had a lot of meaning. Every day he woke up and he had a purpose, and he was living every minute of the day. And then I looked at my life, and I could see clearly how I was avoiding so many things. I wasn't living at all. And it kind of broke my heart, because I thought, well, how much longer are you going to wait? How much longer are you going to do this before you get serious about it? And then it was, what am I willing to do? What am I willing to do to change? Was I willing to say I'm sorry? Was I willing to forgive people that had really hurt me? Was I willing to let that go? Because it kind of, I had this story, these people hurt me, and so I got to be this victim, and I got to feel like kind of entitled to feeling certain ways. I was pretty controlling, because that was my way of, people not taking advantage of me.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, I just kind of became a jerk, and I, in my efforts to protect myself, I failed to see that I wasn't really helping myself either. I was just good at keeping people away from me, but I certainly wasn't facing, the reality of I didn't have any real boundaries. I didn't set the parameters,
Sure.
And I didn't enforce those parameters to keep people from violating my trust. I had to own certain things. Was I willing to do that? Because when you start to get very real and honest with yourself, it's about taking responsibility for everything that goes on.
Sure.
You might not be the person, in the action, but if you're on the receiving end and you don't do something to change it, at some point you really have to understand that you teach people how to treat you. And if I didn't change the way that I showed up and have these boundaries, have these very healthy, parameters that I enforced, and it was my responsibility to do that, not theirs. I knew what hurt me. I knew what I wasn't comfortable with, but I would say it's okay and smile. But inside I was thinking, are you kidding me? That just really hurt my feelings. But I would smile and say, oh, it's okay. Don't worry. It's okay. I know, I understand, and I had to stop doing that and start saying, I don't really think that was okay. I'm going to have to just tell you that wasn't all right with me, and I'm not okay with it. And therefore this has to change. But that's a scary thing to do when you haven't ever done it before, and you've not really even, it's like a muscle that you haven't ever exercised before. You start off and you feel like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. And then eventually you realize you're a lot stronger than you think. And you start to feel good about those boundaries, because you feel so good about not being hurt.
Right.
It's like you set the pace, and you kind of get to, be the architect of how people engage you, because you enforce the boundaries. It's up to you.
And what was the initial thing that happened? If you can remember back to the day of the change, the day that you realized that from this moment forward, everything's going to be different.
Yeah, I remember the exact day. It was December 1st, 2015. And I learned the truth about a relationship that my husband had that he didn't tell me the truth about, and he kept from me for over, like 14 years. And I was told the truth, and in that moment, I felt like my whole world shifted because everything made sense. All of these like weird things that I had been, questioning for all these years, and all this, responsibility that I felt over, our marriage not really working,
Mm-hmm.
I just could see that for me, I was never going to doubt myself again. I knew something was wrong, and I knew that there was something that wasn't quite right there. And I just let people convince me otherwise. But my intuition was screaming the whole time, no, this doesn't make sense. This is wrong. And I used to argue with him about this. But yeah, I knew right then and there that I was never going to doubt myself again. And I wasn't going to let this defeat me, because I was really hurt in that moment. I mean, it was a devastating moment for me, because I don't want to give too much away, but there were some really hurtful circumstances around that time, and to finally be told the truth kind of released me from this sense of guilt. Mm-hmm. And responsibility surrounding the circumstances of my son's passing. In a lot of ways, it kind of liberated me. And I knew right then and there that I didn't know how I was going to arrive at this place of peace and, happiness and joy. But boy, I was not going to stop until I figured it out. And I really put in the time and the work. And I really did. I dug deep. I worked with this amazing therapist, a spiritual therapist. And I just got really clear about what it was I wanted. And it was hard because I didn't know. For the longest time, I didn't know what I wanted. I just know what I didn't want. I didn't want a broken marriage. Didn't want, I didn't think I wanted to be on my own. I was afraid of being on my own. It's been a whole lifetime being kind of taken care of. I went from my dad to my, and living in that household to, I had a little bit of time out in the world on my own, but I still had my dad as this kind of safety net. Mm-hmm. And then I got married, and, I had a husband who was very successful, and I didn't know if I could do this thing, like provide for myself. And I realized I was thinking about everything in the wrong way. I could live with a lot less, but I really couldn't live another minute without being happy. Right. And so I just started getting, finding those places of joy, finding that, I think, the road to truth is paved with little bricks of getting really honest and honest reflection, honest insight, and then honest, forgiveness and asking for it as much as you offer it. And that's how I've gotten from where I was to where I am. And life is good. It's still not all perfect and figured out, but you know what? I'm the happiest I've ever been. And I think that is the best, that's the best testimonial I can give, myself, is I am really happy. For the first time in my life, I really am truly happy. I wake up every day excited. I go to bed, almost like, okay, I know I need to get some sleep, but I just love life. It's like I want to make up for all the time I didn't get out there and live. Yeah, so I don't know.
Let's see the book cover again. The validation, okay. The book cover.
Here it is.
Lessons from Neverland is the book. It's Melissa Hull Gallemore's book. And I've got time for one more question, and I decided that this is going to be my big question. So think about it before you answer. But, some people are living a life that they feel a prisoner in that life. There's so much stuff going on that they think there's no way this is going to change for me no matter what. I'm in this abusive relationship, this dead-end job. I'm 20 pounds overweight. My car insurance is lapsed. I mean, I'm in a bad spot. There's nothing I can do. I can't even open a bank account. The question is, these people who feel that their life is their prison, will reading your book give them freedom?
I think that reading my book will show them that they certainly aren't alone in those emotions and in those feelings and in those circumstances, that there are many people facing really difficult and trying circumstances in life, but attitude and the willingness to find gratitude in even the smallest of things are the building blocks to happiness. It's the gradual little incremental steps and just the tiniest things that you can find appreciation for. And maybe it's just that you can sleep, that you have a pillow to lay your head on, or you have somebody just looks at you from across the aisle at the grocery store and they give you a genuine smile, and they saw you in just that one moment. You were seen by another human being, or maybe you offered a smile and saw someone else. Even though those are the building blocks back to feeling good, back to feeling like you can endure. Life is hard. And that's just a fundamental truth. And when we accept that, we're kind of liberated from it. We can embrace the fact that it's not easy, but there is meaning in the struggle. And that's the wisdom that we all are meant to find while we're here. And then once we find it, if we share it and offer it to another person, I feel like it not only blesses our lives, it blesses theirs. And that for me, was the beginning. I could be grateful for those exchanges, and it kind of bore out into this ability to find happiness in that, which has led me to here. So yes, I think that they will find a way to feel more liberated, more joy from reading my book.
And that is what's up. Hey, it's Melissa Hull Gallimore on the show today. Melissa, if people want to contact you on the www, how do they find you? How do they reach you?
They can find me at melissahullgallimore.com or melissahull.com or melissagallimore.com. It all goes to the same webpage.
And that is what's
Our
up.
website. So.
Thank you so much for being on my show again today. Let's see the book cover one more time.
Okay.
One more again. Flash the book.
It is. Available on Amazon. So excited about it. Really.
Very
Thank you
nice.
so much for letting me come on the show tonight and just, talk about me and life and the book. It's always really a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure to have you, and I'm looking forward to seeing the next step on your trajectory in life, to see what's going to happen. 217. Woo!
I know.
It's
going to be a big year for me, I can tell.
I think so. Melissa, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much.